You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. And when you hear this intro, you know that Frank's on. And we're going to be chatting about hunting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it.
There you go, Cody Gearin. Cop that, mate. Where's your intro song?
Oh, welcome back, listeners. Look, man, these things just keep on coming. And I know I've been talking about the Feral Goat Abatement Plan. So I thought, you know what, I've been meaning to go through it on the air. And I thought, who better than the man himself? He knows a little bit, or I should say a lot about everything. Frank, always a pleasure to have you on, mate. How's things?
Oh, geez, you're full of crap. You are. That's terrible.
I'm being honest, mate. Every time,
mate. Oh, unbelievable.
Listen, anytime I don't know something, I just have to call you, and you know it. So yeah, that's great. Why you have the title, mate.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. That's terrible. Yeah, no, going. That's going good, mate. And we'll delve into this a little bit, and we'll see how what we can pull apart and how we can fix it ourselves. And then maybe someone might listen to this podcast and do something about it.
Oh, I don't think we can do much worse for hunters. Let's be honest. I mean, we'll get into it, but hunting's mentioned twice in the whole document, which is just, it's insane to me.
Which is quite strange.
Especially, look, after talking with Clyde Graff from Wild Boys or TV Wild over in New Zealand, and he's, 20 odd docos or short films on 1080 and how bad it really is. And we don't see that side of it very much. We seem to get this nice little research data that it's definitely painting a picture that this is a safe, good poison. I think what's happened over in New Zealand's clear to say it's not everything he discussed.
Well, yeah, just thinking about it, it's a safe poison. Like that's an oxymoron, isn't it? It's a safe poison. Like
I agree.
Meant to give you death. So yeah, I can't see it being a safe poison, but nonetheless, they're probably trying, as you said, try to make it look a little bit more, less intrusive by calling it that, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different camps when we start talking about this stuff. There's people that are just purely thinking about the natives and by thinking, hey, do whatever means necessary to wipe any ferals out. And I think sometimes that narrow approach and that tunnel vision is an issue because I don't think they can sit back and take a step back and go, this isn't great for the ferals, for the natives as well, especially here in Australia, because, talking about 1080, we've got a lot of carnivorous animals on the landscape that are native. And exactly what Clyde said, if you poison an animal, it becomes this big toxic bait. Yeah, that's not good. Whether it be quolls, whether it be dingoes, whether it be anything like that, the animals are going to suffer, and they're native animals. And the amount of 1080 that is used, especially over in New Zealand, I'm not 100% sure how much is used here, but either way, if it's anything like New Zealand and how they use it, my God, it's more than enough to kill whatever is going to be consuming it pretty quickly.
Which is quite strange considering they're trying to push the conservationist card in all this, yet what they're doing is just creating more of a hazard, I suppose, for the environment. Plus, you're putting that poison out there, and that poison is going to stay out there in the environment. So, you're going to have birds of prey coming down, eating those carcasses, and just multitude, as you said, different type of little predators and scavengers and things like that eating those carcasses. It's not going to be good for the environment, no matter which way it gets delivered out there. And they're not. Problem being, I don't think they are looking at all the other plans as much as they should. They're just trying to create a beeline straight for the poisoning, where I think what they should be doing is looking more broadly at things that have worked previously. We're not trying to invent the wheel here. We're just trying to do something that's been done before in a better way. And I don't think poisoning is a better way of doing it. I think there are much more ethical ways and easier ways to get it done, and cheaper ways too, being the taxpayer, much more cheaper ways of getting things done, especially in previous drafts. Like, it doesn't even mention in this draft anything about hunting, or mentions quite a little about it, but in the 2003 publication that I read that one, and that actually had a whole page dedicated to hunters.
I really feel that with this one here, like, so there's been the one from 2003. I think they re-looked at it in 2008.
Yeah.
And this is the new one that's come out. And again, it's a
2023.
draft. All right. So the official name of it is the Draft Threat Abatement Plan for Competition and Land Degradation by Unmanaged Goats. So it came out in May 2023 this year, but well, that's when it was made, I suppose. And I've got the link and it will be in the show notes. Or if you shoot us an email over Australian Hunting and Beyond at gmail.com, and I'm more than happy to send you everything that I have. It's very interesting to me that, yeah, hunting's been wiped out. And I think it's very clear that it's working with the feral deer plan. That's the sense that I got, like the way it talks about the feral deer plan, the fact that hunters are really minimized in this plan, and the push of poison, and links to the feral deer plan with the poison.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't think it all just says stuff about just suppressing the actual population. They're all just trying to suppress. They don't want to. There's nothing about elimination. It's just suppression. But mind you, though, what they really want to concentrate on is actually getting rid of them off islands. There's a program underway on French Island off Victoria, which had initial success, and it's got a high biodiversity and cultural value. I'm just reading straight off the paper here, but they're having good luck there, getting rid of them in small islands and things like that, which is fantastic, great, and they're doing that by ground shooting.
Interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting.
So it's working on the islands with ground shooting, but let's not do that here.
Yeah.
Or let's not tap into the vast array of recreational hunters, which is the term they like to use. For me, it's a no-brainer that that's an opportunity which is a cost-effective one to the taxpayer. It is going to hopefully take animals off the landscape. It's going to have meat provided to families. Like, I mean, it just ticks a lot of boxes when we talk about ground shooting. And we'll get into it a bit later as we unpack it. But when we start talking poisons, and after listening to Clyde talk about 1080 and talk about the manufacturers' recommendations and what they're saying and what not to do, man, you just don't want this stuff out there, and especially towards an animal that we could be eating as well.
Yeah, I think there's a whole multitude of different ways we can actually attack this without actually going through the poison, leaving that to the very, very end.
Yeah, I agree. Like,
they're just trying to knock down the population bit by bit, and you can do that bit by bit just by
target nannies.
Yeah, targeting nannies, doing mustering, and then trapping.
Yeah,
ground shooting, things like that. Like, it will bring down the cost something fierce, because then there'll be heaps of jurisdictions and stuff like that when they start bringing the poison out, and it'd be just a waste of taxpayers' money, in my very own opinion. But
and I mean, look, that's it. At the end of the day, this is our opinions. We're not experts by any stretch of the imagination, and we don't profess to be, but this is just our thoughts on what's going on here. Now, you might completely agree, you might completely disagree, you might be somewhere in the middle, and I'd love to hear why. So, if you are one of those people, whether it be agree, disagree, in the middle, if you have an idea that maybe we didn't talk about or something we may have missed, drop us an email. Hit me up on the socials. I want to hear about it, because if I've missed something, or from an oversight, or haven't thought about it, or, whatever it might be, that is a win for me to learn as well when we're talking about these things. So, all right. So look, it is a draft. It is out for consultation for the public at the moment. You can have your say up until 7th of February, 2024. So it essentially is building upon the current threat abatement plan. And I think it's in everybody's best interest to try and keep poison out of the mix here and take your hunter's hat off. Like, poison's not good, and there's going to be a lot of bycatch. I don't understand how they're going to be able to just target goats. If you heard, what Clyde was saying, he was talking about the fact that goats are less likely to take up the baits compared to deer and other animals like that. I've got grave concerns at how that would work with kangaroos and wallabies and the like. So there's that. And then, as we spoke about a bit, like quolls and dingoes and the like, wedge-tailed eagles, anything that eats meat, we have a further problem here. And just the baits in the vicinity. And we heard from Clyde talking about it going into the waterways and if you've checked out any of his videos that I've been posting up on the socials on YouTube, man, it's so scary, just the amount of dead animals. And you can tell it's 1080 poison because it is an anticoagulant and you can see that they're bleeding out. Like it's pretty crazy. So yeah, you've got till the 7th of February to make a submission. I'll probably will do a bit of a draft, just some points for people to consider. I'd love to have it as a working sort of letter or working points. So if I miss something or you got a better idea, as I said, let me know so I can add it to what I'm doing. And I'll probably just do it as a Google form so people can jump on there and have a look at it and really try and make it as best possible for the points. I don't really want to write a letter per se because I want people to have individual submissions to make sure they're definitely seeing them as separate and not one big thing and just wiping them out. So again, 7th of Feb. So where do we start here? I think it replaces the 2008 one, as we mentioned.
Yep.
If you're going to be looking at the document, you also need to look at the background document that gives more information sort of about the goats, impacts on environment, cultural heritage, economic, and also social values. Yeah, it's very interesting reading both documents.
It makes for really good reading, some of it's it's contradicts itself. So one paragraph here, existing goat control methods can be challenging and expensive. In some landscapes, baits are currently used to control a range of vertebrates in Australia, e.g. rabbits, pigs and foxes, and can be a cost-effective method to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of control programs. Baiting can reduce animal populations or maintain low densities after deployment of another control method. And so it goes on to say the plan promotes the trial of new baits for control of unmanaged goats. Sodium fluoroacetate, which is 1080.
Yep.
And there's, I'm not going to pronounce all the other ones here, but the sodium nitrate, the cyanide,
there's a few,
zinc phosphide, and all are possible toxins for the use in goat-specific baits.
Yep.
So it's just...
Look, they've listed goats as, when they talk about threats, they talk about goats as being among the 5 worst invasive species in Australia. Now, I'm not sure where they're talking about here. I'm thinking, for me, I wouldn't have goats right up there. But, hey, I mean, the cane toad would probably be right up there for the damage it does to native wildlife. I'd have cats.
Well, cats are at the top, aren't they?
Well, cats are at the top. I don't know. Goats for me are probably not right up there, but I would definitely think foxes. But I think they're also looking at goats from the perspective of soil erosion and things like that.
Yeah.
Horses compared to goats, but we seem to... it's acceptable to leave horses. It's that really tricky conversation again about what is allowed and what is not. And it really comes down to what different perceptions and who you talk to at the end of the day.
Yeah. So like read the draft, the major thing that they're pushing with the impact of goats is actually pushing out the rock wallabies and then pushing them out. But in saying that, it goes on further to read, there's a potential for further development of goat-specific feeders, such as using artificial intelligent technologies for animal-specific recognition. So that to me is just, we're going to invent a feeder that is going to recognize a goat, and then we're going to open the feeder to feed the goat. How much money are we going to be paying for one of these units, and how many units are we going to be putting out? In all seriousness,
I'm with you. It's seriously concerning that you just sit there and go, that is a real costly. That's costly as hell.
Yeah, it would be. It would be.
Secondly, what's it running on? It'd have to be some sort of battery and solar set up to be running facial recognition. Secondly, what happens when things go wrong with technology? I love tech, but things go wrong. They've got to be maintained on a regular basis. Like, geez, the cost just keeps sort of skyrocketing.
And then if a bait is developed that meets these requirements, the plan supports registration of the bait through the Australian Pesticide and Vet Medicines Authority. So we not only have to invent the bait, we have to register the bait.
Yep.
And then God knows how much money we're going to be throwing down the hole at that. So
look, as we go through it, they actually gave some figures, which I was quite surprised at. I think they lowballed some things, but hey, they gave figures, so that's quite good, and we'll touch on those as we go. But interesting about the rock wallabies. One thing I did find reading this is they're very specific about what are going to be impacted, but they've left out the fact that if you poison the goats, what happens to their bodies? Now, that concerns me as Clyde. Again, I keep going back to Clyde. Now, he spent years and years researching 1080, making documentaries and films, boots on the ground stuff. Yes, he could talk about being its anecdotal evidence, but I do really feel he's onto something here. And when the manufacturers are saying that all animals that have been poisoned need to be removed and either burnt or going to a tip or waste disposal that accepts hazardous materials. Now, that's not going to happen in areas where they're going to be putting these baits, and if they're dropping them from helicopters, if they're putting feeder systems, you can't tell me people are going to be going around scouring the bush for these things and getting them. And according to, the ban1080.org website, they're saying that goats can take up to 7 days from the latency period before they die from 1080. That's super concerning too. Then again, if you're talking about they're eating it, they're going away, then they're dying. What about the native animals? Like, they're touching on animals like they're competing for food sources. What about the animals that are going to eat them? Goannas, quolls, our birds of prey. Oh man, there's just so much that it really is not a good situation talking about the poison.
Now, the domino effect seems to be quite savage, actually, just thinking about it.
And look, I think this plan is also coming out now. I think it's very deliberate in timing because goats have really dipped in their economic value. So it's going to be easier for them to push something through like this with farmers who once upon a time were like, no, we're not letting hunters on to shoot goats because they're worth so much. You definitely know they're not going to poison it. So it's sort of a really good time because goats really aren't worth that much at the moment. And it seems to be coming into El Nino and that we're going to get hit by a bit of a drought. So that means if you take goats off the landscape, there's less competition for food that might be, whether it be sheep or cattle. So I can see a little bit of, that dominoes lining up for why they want to be releasing this now.
Yeah, no, I can see why they're trying to bring it all together in one parcel, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And look, hey, smart move by them. Props to the foresight in going, hey, now's the time to strike.
Well, this is it. So table 9, they got the approximate cost for elements of actions of this plan as of November 2022. Wow, there's some money being spent there.
Oh, 100%. So before we get into that, let's go through just some of the objectives very quickly. It basically has 8 objectives, 45 actions to help achieve the goal. They're designated whether high, medium, or low priority, and each has a time frame, whether being short term, medium term, or long term, or ongoing. So you can really start to see that they've spent a fair bit of time on this, and it's quite well thought out as well. So I'm just going to read through some of the objectives. Some we're going to go into a bit more detail than others because some we can just they're self-explanatory, and I don't think they're really what we need to be talking about. So objective 1 is just to prioritise and protect species, ecological communities, and places that are affected by competition and land degradation by unmanaged goats. Number 2 is encourage research into goat impacts on threatened species and ecological communities. That's interesting for me because if we're saying we need more research, but we've got a plan to take them out because they're so bad, but we still need to research what's going on.
It once again contradicts itself, doesn't it?
It does. And we'll talk about it later when we get to the reference list. Geez, there's some contradictory information in those different articles that were used as references. Objective 3. Maintain up-to-date information on unmanaged goat distribution and abundance and encourage standardized monitoring. 4. Investigate new goat control methods and record and monitor goat control programs. All right, for me, this one we need to really look into because that's basically saying, hey, we're looking at poison.
Yeah, so a couple of paragraphs down, it does even mention the draft of the National Feral Deer Action Plan. It even mentions also hazard action to develop and trial lethal baits.
So reading from it here, so currently no bait is registered for unmanaged goats in Australia. The draft National Feral Deer Action Plan. So this actually shows how long ago this was put in because they're talking about this being draft. That has now gone into place. When did that cut off? Last November off the top of my head? Oh, no, sorry, it was March this year. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this has been sitting in the wings, just waiting, and they've even still referring to it as the draft. Also has an action to develop and trial lethal baits and delivery mechanisms for the control of feral deer, and there will be synergies between bait development for deer and goats. This plan promotes the trial of new baits for control of unmanaged goats, and it's got lists the ones there, talks about the goat-specific feeder, also talking about the fact that they're linking it up to the feral deer plan, saying, "Hey, we can use what they're using already. These things work together. We can sort of cross promote and try and target deer and goats at the same time."
Yeah, but a bit further down, it does even mention about how dingoes that prey on goats as well, but they're also going to eat dead goats, aren't they? They've been poisoned.
Well, so this is where it's just contradictory, isn't it? So, I'm reading exactly from their article here. Dingoes are apex predators that will prey on goats, with goats commonly recorded in the diets of dingoes. There is some observational evidence suggesting dingoes may reduce unmanaged goat populations on mainland Australia, but there's uncertainty about the extent. All right, so hold on here. Let's talk about this. Goats are going to eat the poison. And we know that dingoes, which is actually one of the areas they want to see if we can utilize, but then we're going to have poison goats on the landscape, which we know dingoes eat, and they're not going to be poisoned?
Yeah, no, they must have a special serum to fix that too. I don't
maybe,
know. They might use it. They might use a different type of poison. I'm not quite sure. I'm not really sure how it all works or interties, which I don't know whether it still stays active inside that body once that animal dies, and the next animal that eats it.
So look, going off Clyde and what he was saying, yes, it does. It stays in there, and they basically become what he classified as sublethal, more towards sort of sublethal. But if you have carnivores eating them, they will still die from it. So that was a real concern for me, and that was one thing he raised and said, you've got a lot of predators that eat meat. I definitely would be not using 1080 because it will kill them.
Yeah,
which again is really concerning. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how in one breath you can say dingoes could be part of the solution, and the next saying we're going to poison, and knowing full well that dingoes eat the very food source that you're going to poison. So that's a bit baffling.
Yeah.
So again, we talk about they've got objectives and then they break it down. So they've got here 4.5 trial baits and feeders for goat control under permits and ethics approval. Okay, register the appropriate baits. If one or more baits are successful in trials, that's a medium priority. It's going to be used long term. Determine the value of baits in ungulate-specific feeders as a viable control method for goats. So again, we're going to link it back to the deer. Baits registered for use if trial successful. Feeder design ready for commercialization. Oh, all right. So that's interesting. I wonder who's designing that and who's going to be making the money there. 4.7, investigate if integrated deer and goat management across a region is effective and feasible. Low priority, short term, increased understanding of the crossover in distribution of goats and various deer species and similarities in control method. If feasible, a more cost-effective landscape scale herbivore control. Well, I'm pretty confident this is, again, talking about poison.
Yeah.
It crosses over. Yeah, not great at all.
No, it just seems like they just keep on going on that same loop, and it seems it's going to be costing us ever more money just to get rid of something that we should be using as a resource rather than just poisoning and get rid of it, which is quite
concerning. So objective 5, encourage adoption of best practice management of goats. Objective 6, continuous improvement on animal welfare code of practice and standard operating procedures for goat control. I don't understand how you can then talk about animal welfare code of practice and talk about 1080 or the other poisons as a welfare code. Like, man, it's a horrible way to go.
Oh, yeah. Even you watch the videos over there in New Zealand when they're using it in the deer. It's just a horrible way to, well, anyway, I'd rather the bullet, but
most definitely.
But I don't know. I understand why we're not looking over to New Zealand for other ways that they get rid of goats and things like that. Like they've got ground crews that go around and do lots of shooting. They don't do a lot of aerial shooting. They do a lot of ground shooting with crews with dogs and stuff like that. And they're doing it really, really well. They've even got I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone out there who'd like to correctly, I'm pretty sure there's even a bounty on goats in New Zealand.
I think you're right. I will disagree with you in the sense that they're doing it really well. I thought that until I spoke to Clyde.
Oh, okay.
And he talked about essentially that like 80% of New Zealand now just bait and they just drop 1080 on a 3-year cycle.
Oh.
He brought up cases again, the videos that you can watch of theirs, family poisoned by eating it, deer poisoned. He said goats actually don't take it. So they use cereal baits over in New Zealand.
Right.
And he was saying that deer definitely do eat it. He's seen kiwis. He's seen or the Kia, I think, as well. And he said that where they're dropping baits, some of those bird life are no longer there. In areas they don't use it, he said they're thriving. He goes, again, this is anecdotal evidence, but the reality is if he's on the landscape and he does a lot of time out in the bush, you got to be thinking, well, there's a correlation here at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty insane when you look at what's going on there. I actually thought New Zealand was the way to look at. And he brought up some really concerning points that 1080 is actually made over there by the government and they profit from making 1080.
Oh, right.
That's really concerning because, government making extra money. They shouldn't really be making money off it if it's a public service, but hey, that's up to them and what they do over there. But yeah, really, after listening to him and him going through it, and he's, as I said, he's got a lot of experience and long-term in this and a lot of investment. It's impacted his livelihood with, sponsors and his hunting videos and the like. So yeah, he's got a lot of skin in the game and it's cost him. Because it's cost him, I really do feel that a lot of the stuff he's saying is quite true, but he's saying that depending who you speak to over there, they'll rave about how great 1080 is because they've really done a good job of telling people it's safe and effective, even though there's so much evidence. And he interviews that many farmers, and you should see some of the videos on the cows that have been poisoned by eating 1080 through the cereal baits. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so objective 7, increase public understanding of goat impacts, the need for goat control, and the objectives of the TAP, which is the abatement plan. This is essentially one of the things he raised is that they did a really good job of using the media to brainwash the public that didn't really understand. And that's where I feel this here is literally a mind control sort of thing, saying, hey, we're going to really push out here and control the narrative around how safe and effective this poison is, and it's going to be great. That concerns me again because I really don't feel that they're objective about this because they have a goal in mind.
It seems to be an agenda there, doesn't it?
Most definitely. And yeah, so objective 8 is just form a TAP implementation committee. Again, this looks very similar to the deer plan. It also looks like it's going to be stacked in one's favor to support what they really want to push here.
Yeah, and just a couple of the points that they talk about is like unifying approaches to animal welfare in goat control. That one sentence there is exactly what you were just talking about. Unifying approaches to animal welfare in goat control.
Yeah.
Pretty much telling everyone how effective it is and how safe it is.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. All right, so now we start to get into the plan, which I'm very interested in, and that's the costing. So Section 3 talks about investment and implementation of the plan. 3.1.1 is costing. All right. Ooh, hold on to your seats, people. I'm glad I pay tax. Jesus. I feel my taxes are going to go up somehow, though.
That's one thing you're certain in life.
So the implementation role for this plan is going to be the manager level is going to be 124,000 per annum for a minimum of 5 years. So there's 800,000. There's one. Bang. The next one is the biodiversity asset prioritization, talking about one or more people with expertise in ecology, data collation, spatial analysis, and mapping, equivalent to a senior project officer full-time, is 112 grand plus on costs. So this is all sort of minimum, again, over 5 years. Every 3 years, they would need more people for 6 months, which is 56,000. Additional information is required, which will need to be obtained through research projects and field work. Again, this is more basically personnel and cost. They're saying that's a minimum 300,000. Goat distribution and density data collation and mapping control programs. They're talking about a scientist and a GIS officer, 90,000 per annum plus on costs. Updates required every 2 years. Again, a one full-time over 6 months, which is 45,000. That was 240,000. Research project into goat density impacts, grazing pressures, and threatened species impacts. A senior researcher, including field costs, is 260,000 per annum for a minimum of 3 years, and assistant for 3 years at 80,000. There's 1.1 million. The next one, Frank, construction of fenced areas to exclude goats from priority biodiversity assets. Materials cost for standard goat exclusion fencing is 3,000 to 4,200 per kilometre, depending on landscape. Labour typically doubles these costs. Fence maintenance will be ongoing. They're talking a minimum cost as 12,000 to 16,800. That's per square kilometre, if I'm reading this correctly. Jesus. That's a lot of money. There's a lot of places to protect.
Yeah, no, I was just reading this with the fencing, and I thought to myself, you also have to maintain all these fences as well. Who's going to maintain all these fences?
Yes, you're right. That's going to be expensive, but even just putting them up in the first place is going to be super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, and again, as I said, I like the fact they've got some figures in here, and it would be very hard, but they haven't told us how many sort of threatened areas that they'd like to fence and given a rough guide. And I think that's been deliberate because I think that would be very expensive and costly, and it would make these figures look very bad. It wouldn't inflate them where they should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Put them exactly where they need to be.
Well, that's right, but they don't want that to happen. Goat trapping yards. So they're saying that one trap yard is $6,000.
Well, it's cheaper than a fence.
Well, agreed. Annual repair and maintenance is approximately $400. I reckon that's probably cheaper than repairing the fence as well. Additional labour, transport costs for removing goats from the trap yard to a depot or abattoir, depending on the head, weight, distance, etc. That all makes sense. And they're saying $6,000 initial outlay, minimum of $500 for each time goats are removed from one trap yard. So you've got to be thinking when we're talking about animal welfare, that's got to be regularly done. You'd think probably at least weekly, I would be guessing.
But that'd be easily done with either a camera or a drone even.
Yep. Yeah.
Can be looked at. There's no worries there. So they talk about the costing of moving these animals to the abattoir. What are they going to get from the abattoir? Putting them there, how much money they're going to receive. So it's actually going to go down in cost, really, isn't it?
Exactly. We're going to lose money. Now, for me, if you're going to do that as the abattoir, I would be, let's be pragmatic and look at where we can give these to people in need. You know, I keep talking about how people are really feeling the pinch with inflation here in Australia at the moment. There is a lot of people, I see it on Facebook all the time in the social media groups I'm on, that are saying, hey, has anyone got some food to donate because we can't afford food this week. We're a family. I've got a couple of kids. Here's the perfect thing to say, you know what, let's start to use that and feed some of our people in need here. Like, they're not worth anything at the abattoir. I'd be more than happy to say, hey, my taxpayer dollars going to help people in need by supplying them with free meat. That's a win. I'd do that hands down, as opposed to poisoning, as opposed to some of the options that they've got here.
Well, not only that, like, why not put that into the justice system and pay for the food that we're paying the
great idea.
The guys in the people in jail,
prison,
like in the prisons. Like, why aren't we offsetting that food there, and then like not having to spend money there and save money there?
What about schools? Why not look at public schools like they do in the US and in other countries around the world where they supply lunch? I mean, if you're knocking over goats and doing it this way, let's put that in as part of a plan. That's got to be a win as well.
Someone will take the meat. Someone in society will take the meat.
Hey, I'll put my hand up. I love goat. Like, it baffles me. It's the most consumed meat on the planet, and yet we've got this abundant resource that we're not even talking about that as a serious option. They've got island eradication here. They're saying expect a minimum of $1 million for that. I like this one, Frank. The development of new goat control options.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Senior project officer, 160 for 18 months. On-ground trial of new bait, 10,200. Approval for new bait is 116,500.
Oh, there it is. There's the cost right there.
Yeah, wow. The permit for the use of an unapproved chemical is $350. They're saying it's $1 million just to develop. That's not to deploy. And that's, hey, if that bait doesn't work as well as they want, or they're finding it's poisoned, which I'm dubious if that would ever come back in the data, there's others to trial. Geez, so there's multiple that cost goes up a little bit. Management guides, different people, $350,000. Here's one for me, right? Community engagement to increase public understanding about goat impacts and control and promote best practice management for environmental outcomes. All that terminology is definitely pushed towards let's make it acceptable to use the poison. That's going to be $350,000 for a social media and communications officer, part-time earning $100,000. Part-time, geez, maybe I'm in the wrong field. Printing, photo licensing and distribution costs would be additional. So this marketing campaign is, I would be saying, is going to be upwards of $500,000 to turn the public who are not sure and sort of get them on board with using poisons.
Yeah, see, I just, as hunters, I just think we're a bunch of mugs because really we go and pay to hunt in state forests to shoot deer and goats, and here you've got a perfectly good reason to employ or to engage these people, so I'm sure they would pay as well to go and hunt goats and deer in these regions and go and get their meat that they want to eat. Why aren't we looking at them? Like, why is there no activity here? Like, the development of new goat control options. Like, why aren't we in there at some point? Well, why are we talking about poisons? Why aren't we a different option as in trying to...
It basically sounds what you're saying is a bounty, Frank. And let's be real here. Look at all this money that they're wanting to throw at all this stuff. Imagine having that money sitting there for a bounty. So, hey, you knock off a goat, $10, whatever. Like, there's a lot of goats at $10 in the few millions of dollars that's going to be pushed on this. And the cost estimates were adjusted based on an average annual inflation rate of 2.5%.
Wow. Wow.
That's not even close to the inflation rate at the moment.
They're also talking about spending money. They could really be making money off the actual goat itself, just with all the meat. They could be sent to an abattoir, cutting up and selling the meat if they wanted to, really. Like, there'd be so many people that would buy it, and that would bring the cost right down if they did that. I don't understand why we need to waste this animal and leave it on the ground to waste away while other people can come and purchase this meat. Surely there'd be an easy way of getting them to the abattoir, getting them cut up, getting them boxed up, and getting them shipped to where they need to go to, surely. And that would create more jobs. Like, I'd rather create jobs like that than develop a new poison, really.
Yep. No, again, agreed. I think we could definitely use the meat. So we finally get into some shooting. So it's got ground control shooting. They've come up with the $70 per goat and up to $235 per goat for the remaining goats without assistance from trained dogs. I don't understand how the cost jumps from $70 a goat to $235 per goat for the remaining goats.
I think it's because it takes longer to search, therefore, because you're not paying on how many goats. You're not paying per capita, you're paying per hour.
Yeah.
So that's where the cost gets more. But in saying that, how much does State Forest pay for their goats to be culled?
Well, yeah, a big zero.
Nothing. How much do we pay to?
Yeah, that's right. How much money is going back into the community? Well, I like this, how it said trained dogs. Okay, now this is another thing that we should be looking at is, again, we use dogs to hunt pigs. We should be, looking at bailers for goats, bailing them up, and then whether it be shooting them and using the meat, whether it be mustering them into a pen, whatever it might be, there definitely should be something there as an option.
Yeah, I think that this would be, I think mustering, trying to take off my hunter's cap here, but I think mustering, if you get a team in there who knows what they're doing, they've got a couple of really good dogs, they set up yards and off they go, like, you can really knock down a goat's population by mustering. Because they're a herd animal, they stick close together, when they run away from you, they're all huddled up. It wouldn't be that hard to put a big dent in that population just by doing some mustering on good ground.
Yep.
That would bring your cost right down, because then that's a live animal you can export.
Now we're into aerial shooting. So there's some various figures getting thrown up here, but they're talking about aerial culling costs from $5 per goat in open rangelands.
$5, nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how they get that figure.
I wonder how you do get that for one goat.
Out of a
$5.
helicopter.
Out of a helicopter. Like,
so we've got some more figures coming up, which I don't know how they get that. But hey, let's have a look. Up to 150 per goat is where they're saying maxes out. They're using this from an island though, Dirk Harthog Island. So I'm interested as we come further down here. In rangelands over 100 square kilometres with 25 goats per kilometre squared, the cost of removing all goats is predicted at $515,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Cost of initial reduction to 5 goats per square kilometre is predicted to be $53,000. Cost of ongoing control to maintain 5 goats per square kilometre at $26,000.
That's per kilometre squared.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, Australia's a small place, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tiny, mate. We can't fit countries inside ours, can we? That's just ridiculous.
Oh my God.
That is a lot of money.
What about this one? Helicopter hire from $900 to $2,500 per hour, depending on the type.
Well, yeah.
And then the agency staff and contractors, shooters, navigators, $1,100 per day.
For deer culling.
Yeah. Now, they're using deer culling figures, but it's going to be like essentially the same. Again, this was done in 2022. Everything's far more expensive than it was last year. So all these figures have definitely gone up.
Well, look, let me. You're a smarter man than me when it comes to maths. So I'm going to put some figures to you. All right?
Yeah, you go.
So we got a helicopter hire of $905 per hour.
Yep.
Then you have $1,100 per day to operate that machinery.
Yep.
But I can shoot you a goat for $5. So how many goats per hour do I have to be shooting to make that $5, Matt?
Well,
there you go. Work that one out.
But then that's where it comes back to this. Removing all goats is predicted to be about $500,000. And that's taking it from 25 goats per kilometre squared to 5 goats per kilometre squared in a 100-kilometre area. It doesn't even these figures are so all over the place. They've also got to be the cheapest possible, because I'm going out on a limb here saying this isn't going to be. These are the figures they can get away with putting in here and not get called on. But the reality is it's going to be far more expensive.
Well, I can't see them going over 100 kilometers squared and then taking out, all these goats except for 25 goats per kilometer. So you're still looking at 25,000 goats left over in that area, in that 100 square kilometer radius, after they've been paid that $515,000. Is that what that says? Am I reading that wrong? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mate, I'm confused with it, to be honest. I sit there and just go, what is going on here? Like, this doesn't really make sense to me. Again, I'm no mathematician, but yeah, there's some holes in this.
There are a couple of holes in this. But I just think that they need to concentrate on proven things that they've gone through before, like mustering, and then like if you put your traps up, and these traps aren't cage traps, they're a 5 acre paddock, pretty much with high fencing on it, with a ramp, and they've got feed in there and a water source, which is usually a dam or something like that, and the goats jump into that from a ramp and stay in there. And then when it's all said and done and there's enough to fill a truck, they bring the truck in and then they muster them onto the truck. Like it's a very low cost operation, and you get a lot of good results real quick from it, because goats are visiting water sources every day in the height of the drought, especially over summer.
Yep, agreed. Everything you said just makes complete sense. Yeah, it's baffling a little bit here. Well, let's get into the references here. There's 4 pages of references. Mostly they come on threatened species documents. So you can see that they're really pushing it from one angle of trying to protect threatened species, whether it be animals, mainly talking more probably about the actual natural environment, such as, trees and erosion and things like that. For me, there was a few references of note. One was a Department of Environment and Energy from 2018, a submission, and it was an inquiry into the impact of feral deer, pigs, and goats in Australia, national priorities to prevent the problems worsening for the natural environment, community, and farmers. Another one, same group, RSP Australia submission. So these are all submissions, which is concerning again, because this is just, you and I, every regular person can just put in a submission and they're drawing on these as fact. So I found that very interesting too.
Yeah, right.
Again, that was into the inquiry into impact of feral deer, pigs, and goats in Australia. I'm not going to read the rest because it's the same thing. CSIRO was another submission. So very interesting that they're just grabbing submissions in regards to this inquiry. But hey, look, interesting. Then we had another one that was the use of an ungulate-specific feed structure as a potential tool for controlling feral goats in Australian forest ecosystems. Now, this is where it's interesting. I jumped onto the submissions and which ones they were grabbing for the inquiry that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
First one, Centre for Invasive Species Solutions. Interestingly enough, they've just got different names. Then we've got the Invasive Species Council. I always thought they were the same thing. Maybe they're different, but interesting. The Department of Environment and Energy, Rangers Council, the ADA did, Tasmanian Deer Advisory Committee did. So we've got quite a few of just people making submissions. Interesting, the ones they picked out to use, which just happen to support really what they want to do with poison.
Well, this is it.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Exactly right. For them, it does.
Correct. Another one, and I like this one, and this is where it gets contradictory again. And again, I'm not an expert. I don't profess to be, but just unpacking and drilling down a bit into the evidence that they're using. So we've got a resource in their references from RedX, I think, B and Forsyth in 2004. It's called The Review of Existing Red Fox, Feral Cat, Feral Rabbit, Feral Pig and Feral Goat Control in Australia. Information Gaps. Final report for the Australian Government Department of the Environment and Heritage. 7.1.2, native species for which there is limited information. This is word for word. I'm reading this verbatim. There is very little information on the impacts of feral goats on or benefits of feral goat control for native species or ecological communities. There is some information from an exclosure study in the Flinders Ranges, Hensel 1991. It was shown that feral rabbits, rather than feral goats, were a critical factor in determining mulga regeneration because they killed nearly all of the seedlings.
Yeah, right.
I'm confused.
But they already bait those. They already bait rabbits, it says in that draft.
Man.
So that's working well.
I don't understand this. This is telling us that we don't have enough information and they've included it as a reference. So is that because they want to study it more like they've said, or that goats are maybe not as bad as they're saying, but we're going to leave that part out, but maybe we have to uncover more about goats to paint them in a worse picture.
They definitely do need to do a little bit more study on goats.
Oh man, so bad. So I've got concerns. So let's just break these down. Human consumption of poison meats, especially in the rangeland goats. We spoke about the ban1080.org has flagged and said goats can have a latency period of 1080 for 7 days. That can poison humans. The other thing we didn't talk about is that in 2021, the Australian goat export market was valued at $242 million. Now, we understand that that's now dropped, but goats seem to be like this roller coaster. 1 minute it's up, next minute it's really low, then it's right up there again. So,
well, how do you know that a goat has consumed 1080 within the last 7 days?
You don't. Yeah. This is the problem with it and my major concern. And Clyde flagged this too and said if you're selling meat, as soon as you start to throw out 1080 there, that market's gone.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Well, yeah, the rangeland market, would just drop. And that will affect heaps of farmers.
Oh, that affects a lot.
Like, well, lots of farmers going through drought at the moment out west who are just pretty much trying to get rid of their problem by mustering all the range owned goats they can and just offloading them to whichever stock auction place will take them. And they're not going to get much money for them, fair enough. But in saying that, they're not going to get any money whatsoever once the poison does come out, and no one's got to buy range owned goats.
So, look, it sometimes hurts me to do this, but shout out to, Australia's number one hunting podcast guest, Cody Guerin.
Oh, no.
I know. He was talking about on the Hunter's Campfire the DSE, which is the dry sheep equivalent.
Dry stock equivalent.
And essentially what he's saying, and it makes sense, is that there is a calculation to work out how much feed an animal needs, and that way you can understand how many should be on the landscape. Now, we obviously talked, Cody and I, and we were talking about how I think it's a great system and it should be done with everything. It should be done with kangaroos on the farm. It should be done with feral goats. It should be done with deer, you name it. It should be done to work out the carrying capacity of everything there so that you can keep it in balance. That makes sense. That's an animal welfare. That's a positive animal welfare objective, I feel.
Well, it makes sense for a farmer to work that out, because more kangaroos or goats or pigs or deer on his property, the less livestock he can have on there to turn a profit.
Correct.
So it's all relevant.
But why aren't we using something like that across the board here?
Are they talking about removing animals just from national parks and stuff like that? I know they want to remove for all the islands, that's fair enough, but national parks and things like that.
They're not wanting to wipe them all out. That's positive in one sense, because I do think they're a resource, and there's some positives we'll talk about a bit later by having them on the landscape, in my opinion, and I want to hear your thoughts, especially as a rural fiery. Yeah, it does. For me, I don't really understand what's happening here. I think we could be much more pragmatic going through it. Let's keep going with these concerns, because there's quite a few, I feel. The collateral damage with the poison. We've got so many more native animals that will eat either the same food. So if the aggregator doesn't work 100% perfectly, we're in big trouble. And then we've got so many animals that are native that prey on meat. That's not great either. And I don't think we can track some of these things either, Frank.
Well, no, you won't. No. Who's going to be out there counting how many dead eagles and dead falcons, brown falcons are all out there?
It's all good to say, hey, the aggregator's going to work for the target species, but as soon as that animal's poisoned and drops dead somewhere and it's not going to be removed, let's be real, that becomes a toxic bait.
Yeah, 100% it does.
So the bycatch is going to be massive.
You don't know what the impact's going to be really until you actually till they start using it. And then, I don't know, it's a bit too late after that.
Yeah, well, it's registered. And will it be swept under the rug? That's my sort of concern is, hey, if you don't do autopsies on dead wedge-tail eagles, how do you know that wedge-tail eagle died from 1080 if you refuse to, do the autopsy?
Well, and then you've got to find that.
Yep.
But, yeah, but even in New Zealand, you can see they start using the 1080, as you said. They use a 1080 somewhere, and then all the birds start not dying off, but it's more noticeable. You don't see them anymore in the environment.
Yeah.
So where have they gone?
Yeah. Again, concern about dingoes. They were raised as a possible solution, but then, the bait is going to obviously have an impact on them. And I think this 1080 really seems to be what they're going to push here. That's so bad. As Clyde was talking about how they use it in the US, how they use 1080 over there, man, it's so crazy. We just make it rain with 1080 here and in New Zealand compared to how the States use it. And this is coming from a country that, pushed glyphosates and, oh my God, it's just it's crazy.
I think they've banned glyphosates, haven't they?
They have now, but they just pushed it for so long, and they've banned 1080 for a long time. I think he was talking about something like you can only use 6 milligrams of it per year or 2 years. Like it's very, very low dosage compared to the amount New Zealand's using. And he had the figures. It was a lot. Yeah, crazy. If you haven't listened to that podcast, get over and listen to that, because Clyde knows his stuff and spent a long time going through it. And some of the info is just so concerning.
Yeah.
Hunting. not really mentioned. Shooting, aerial culling, on-ground culling, never mentioned hunting in the plan. It's briefly in the background document.
Yes, it is briefly in the background document, and in the 2003, it actually has a lot more time and space dedicated to it, where they talk about hunters going onto farmers' land and eradicating pests and things like that, and at to no cost of any organisation.
All right, so here's the wording that I love. So this is, again, I'm reading word for word out of the plan. Some concerns have been raised about the role of amateur shooters and recreational hunters in goat control because at times they may not always meet humane standards. Jesus Christ. You're going to dump 1080 and you're going to poison everything so it has this slow, painful death. But hey, amateur shooters and recreational hunters may not meet humane standards. Wow, how badly do you have to stuff up regularly as a shooter to inflict the same amount of pain that the poison does?
Well, you've seen how good they are on helicopters. You've seen how
using the shotguns.
Yeah, it's
and needing 3.8 shots per animal. That's
definitely
amateur shooters and recreational hunters definitely the problem in my opinion.
I regularly use 10 rounds to take down a goat. How about you?
That's pretty much, the last time I knocked 2 over was with 2 shots. So, wow. It honestly baffles me, some of this. Look, this gets me to an interesting one here. I was talking about the new, there's a push in New South Wales at the moment to look at the firearms qualification training. This amateur shooter and recreational hunter label gets thrown around. And one of the pushes at the moment is to have it as a TAFE Cert 4 in training and assessing. I'm not completely against that on the premise that that is a qualification that would be flagged against your USI or what's USI stand for? I think it's Universal Student Identification Number.
Yeah.
And that's training. So does that start to remove these labels of amateur shooter and recreational hunter, especially if there's a practical component? Now, there is some things I don't agree with it, talking about the practical component has to be done at a SSAA range. You could then talk about how it's unfair to people in rural communities because there's not rangers that are there. Look, there is some negatives to that happening, but I also feel there might be some positives because this terminology that is being used is definitely to depict shooters and hunters in a poor light.
Yeah. The simple lack of the representation of hunters in this document just clearly shows that. They really don't want anything to do with them.
The other thing that was interesting was they would then talk about how if events are organised, supervised and part of an integrated control strategy, there have been little or no animal welfare concerns raised. For example, in South Australia and Victoria, the SSAA and the Conservation and Wildlife Management branch contribute to approximately 8% of goat removals.
The amateurs.
Right. So wait a minute, you've just contradicted yourself by saying, hey, we're going to do this as a group.
Right.
Okay.
So let's not send one, let's send them all the amateurs in there.
Yeah. And wait a minute. So here it is again. Volunteer shooters from these branches must undertake training and accreditation processes, which includes firearms proficiency prior to being involved in culling operations. So that's just shooting off a bench. They're similar to the kangaroo one here for SSAA, 8 centimeters. I think it's the spread. You need to have 3 or 5 shots. I can't remember off the top of my head, but you can be rested on a bench at 100 meters. Okay. Look, I'm not against the firearms proficiency. I think, it's a lot different to shooting in the field. But hey, if that ticks the box and people are going to say, hey, that means you're accredited and you've got training under your belt, all right. Like, I'm not against sort of that. Yeah, I don't know. There's just so many holes and contradictions about this.
As a hunter, you don't go out there to injure the animal.
No, not at all.
You go out there to humanely dispatch the animal, and if you do muck it up, you're going to put another one straight into it again to fix it. You're going to rectify that issue instantly.
But that's worst case scenario compared to poison, which best case scenario is never going to be anywhere near as quick as a bullet.
No, the suffering, the prolonged suffering of the animal's death, I feel is unhumane and unnecessary.
100%. So you are in the New South Wales Rural Fire Service?
Yep.
And there's been some interesting information out there. about using grazing goats to reduce fire risk.
Yeah, this is it. So they've got some rangeland goats, and they're using a bushfire prevention in New South Wales. So where you find it hard to do burn offs in the scrub, where it's a bit wet and you can't actually get the right conditions to actually burn off. So if it's too damp, obviously nothing's going to burn, but you can send the goats in if it's too wet, and they can remove all that brush for you, and we don't have to put any fuel or anything onto that to get it to burn. We don't have to have a controlled exercise. We just have to put a fence up. And over go the goats, and in 2-3 days, same time probably take to do the actual hazard reduction itself, they're gone and done the job for us, and we haven't put any smoke into the air. We haven't had to use 100 or so volunteers to do a perimeter, put in edges and stuff like that. We literally just sent in goats, and they just do their natural thing. So I think it's a fantastic idea. And they've got there's 40 goats there. They've got 40 goats involved in a trial in the State Central West, employed by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service to help with bushfire prevention in the area. There you go. They've done an absolutely fantastic job, said RFS Inspector Troy Gesbeck. This is off ABC News. You can look it up, guys, if you want to. Just Google it. Goats on front line to help prevent another New South Wales black summer of bushfires.
I'm going to throw I'm going to throw these up on the links. I'll probably even put it up on the website, to be honest. Yeah, man, I'm so confused at some of this. So at no point anywhere have they talked about how feral goats, if we want to call them that, and that's what they are, let's be honest about it. Feral goats are not doing the same thing as these special goats because there's a fence around them. Like, you've got to say that there's got to be some positive, because I did post up and had a few people sort of talk about different things. And for me, one of those is, hey, we're not also talking about that. You can say that they're bad for the environment, that, erode areas or they eat different things. But I'll tell you what, if they're going to do a positive for the bushfires, especially after the season we had a couple of years ago, man, you can't tell me that that's more destructive on the environment than the goats.
Yeah, look, their use is really good in just reducing the fuel load in and around the areas where you can't actually get burning off done. Like, everyone says, like, why didn't we do it burning off? Why didn't we get this hazard reduction done before the fires? Everyone was asking questions, why? And it's conditions. You've got to have the perfect conditions to actually do a hazard reduction. You have the right humidity. Everything has to be the right sort of moisture content to get the fire going and everything like that. The wind has to be right. The wind's too strong, but they're not going to do it, obviously. But here you don't have all that to contend with when you use the goats. You set up an external electric fence, which the goats know what that does. They know they touch it, they're going to get shocked. So they stay in the confines of that. And what I find even more better is, in this article, it says here that the RFS is set to extend the trial to other parts of the state, including Greater Sydney, which is part of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's part of the areas inside the Draft Threat Abatement Plan, of where all these species of trees and all that are being threatened or endangered.
Yep.
So they're using the goats in those areas there to reduce the fuel load, yet they want to kill goats in that area because they're damaging the environment.
So, well, we can only use domesticated goats, apparently, because the feral ones don't eat the same thing. Yeah, interesting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. But yeah, no, good on the RFS for doing that. I think that's fantastic.
That's a great idea. It's same as the cultural burning. I think there's again, it's a pragmatic approach of using multiple different things here that working together in synergy and works. When you put poison into the mix, this really doesn't. It doesn't. Hunting then sort of goes out. The price of the meat drops. There's so many flow-on effects that it's not working in synergy with other solutions that could all be bundled up together and used as a holistic approach. So let's talk about what's missing. So the EPA over in New Zealand state this. Basically, keeping safe around 1080 in the bush or countryside. Try and avoid areas where 1080 is being used. Don't touch anything that might be there. Keep a close watch on small children and warn older children of the risks. Keep dogs on a leash. Don't let them roam especially in the bush, and don't let them eat bait or carcasses. Dogs are extremely sensitive to 1080, about 10 times more sensitive than possums, which is the target species over in New Zealand. Oh, wait, possums, don't they come from here?
Yep, they do. They do come from here.
Yeah, interesting. So there's more bycatch, and dogs are extremely sensitive. There goes those dingoes that were apparently going to be used as part of the solution as well. Huh. I'm no genius here, Frank, but it doesn't look great, eh?
I think they've got to look. They've got to explore other avenues before they get to this poison thing. I think.
Oh man, this is the thing. Then it doesn't really seem like that, does it? It's yeah. So I've already talked about ban1080.org, their website. I've got that. It's saying it's not a humane poison, which is toted around out there. And it's here. Goats can die up to 7 days after ingesting 1080 poison. Lizards up to 22 days. Some native marsupial herbivores up to 6.5 days. Some native marsupial carnivores up to 6 days. Sheep can die up to 96 hours afterwards. Like, I'm sorry. I'd be interested to see if you gut shot an animal, how long it would take for that thing to die. Like, I wouldn't go out and test it. I'd say, like, but it would be really interesting to see if it would be as long as some of these 1080 poisonings.
Well, the thing that hits me is if you gut shoot an animal, the dread that you feel internally straight away and the urgency you have to rectify that situation straight away, it hits home. Yet here we are saying that you can we can pretty much dish out the exact same, that it's got to be suffering for the same amount of time, pretty much with the exact same symptoms.
Yeah, so if you make a mistake and gut shot an animal, that it's basically worst case scenario for a hunter shooting the animal, but it's probably the same on average compared to using 1080.
Yeah, it's the same result if you use 1080. Yeah. It's the same result.
Yeah, which isn't great.
Yeah.
Also from the EPA, Frank, is the New Zealand Food Safety Authority control relating to feral meat residues. All right, so of greatest significance in relation to the control of 1080 residues is the advice relating to the withholding times for taking of meat from 1080 application areas. Don't take wild or game estate animals from an area where 1080 has been laid until 4 months after the operation has ended or 2 months after the operation has ended and after 100 millimeters of rain has fallen. Oh, man, this is getting worse and worse. So there goes, as I said before, there goes any consumption of the meat in an area after the operation has ended. You got to wait another 4 months. And from what Clyde was saying is for dogs, it's 12 months. That's insane. Yeah, oh, man, it just keeps getting worse when you start talking about this crap.
Well, where are you going to hold these animals for 4 months? Say you go out and capture these animals and you want to take them to the market. Where do you hold them for 4 months? You haven't got any feed to feed them.
I don't know. Look, there is some things that I like. So over in New Zealand, they have a national wild goat hunting competition. I think things like that, again, we can talk about how things can be improving. Over there, so from Queensland government, they talk about ground shooting is labour intensive but can produce good results if control programs are well planned and effort is maintained. Okay, why are we not having someone go out there, get a heap of farmers on the books, open up national parks, do what the DPI have done, put a bounty on goats? Like, that seems more sensible in an approach than just saying, hey, we're going to develop a poison and drop it out there, and then we can't use the meat. Then the area is tainted. Then you can't eat any game meat. Then your dogs, all our natives, are going to be suffering. Oh, man, it's just, yeah, it's crazy.
It is. Once again, they need to just have a look at the simple solutions and then put bait towards the very, very end of it, I think.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Agreed. That spot.
All right, so as we said, this draft is opened. It closes on the 7th of February 2024. To give your feedback, you need to send it to invasive species at dcceew.gov.au. Again, I'm happy to send that to you. Contact me by the socials or send me an email, and I'm more than happy to send you out this. I've done a bit of a PowerPoint. I'll probably try and make a video as well so that people are, a bit well versed with some dot points to say, hey, these are concerns for me. As I said, if you have any to add, please get in contact with me because I would love it to have a bit of a rolling document so we can all add it. But just in wrapping up here, things to consider if you are making a submission. For me, it would be poisons, great concern. So people who consume it, the financial impacts, how's it going to impact our native animals? What about the dingoes, as we've covered? What I think could be improved is the increased use of hunters. They're not even in there realistically, bar the background document, a governing body that accesses, farmers, properties, state forests, national parks, areas of concern, have ballots. Like, there's so many elements that we could do here to have a positive economic contribution and not cost us anywhere near as much. Definitely, for me, I always talk about the North American conservation model, a tag system to hunt different animals. I think that could be a win for this as well. Again, I think the bounty system is probably the way to go here, because I really do feel that that's a way that, instead of spending that money elsewhere, promote hunters to do it. I think they will probably get out there and definitely help out, not waste the meat, not increase other feral problems, as opposed to aerial culling and the like. Again, economic input. There is zero information about the economic value hunting offers the communities. That needs to be in there. And I personally also think the hit piece that we have going on by them wanting to push media, by push it out there to the average person, that's a hit piece to try and get them on side to do what they want to do. Hunters and dog teams, competitions. There's so many things we could do. If you want any information and you want me to send it over, please send me an email on australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com or through the socials. If you haven't, go check out Facebook. I'm going to put up all the YouTube videos from the Graph Boys on 1080 if you're interested in the subject. And I do encourage everybody to get out there and make a submission. Frank, some final thoughts, mate?
I'm a real simple man, Matty. I'm a very simple man. I don't have a PhD or anything like that, but I know what's right and know what's wrong, and I feel that if we are prolonging the death of an animal, that's wrong in my books. So have a look at other ways of eradicating the goats before we get the poison out there. And seeing as I'm a taxpayer like you are, I don't want poison in my Australia. So leave it out of it. Let's try to think of different ways of eradicating the goats. There are heaps of other ways of doing it, and I don't think we need to go past this point of using poisons, paying it out of taxpayer-funded money, when there are other proven ways that we've done it before, and we've knocked down the numbers before. That's just me.
Well said. I think, I value your opinion. That's why I wanted you on for this one, because, as I said, you're probably one of the most knowledgeable people I know across a broad range of topics. So I definitely wanted your input into this one. And, I like the checks and balances. I like someone that will probably tell me how it is, which you do regularly. And, well, via my wife, I should say. You do definitely like to stir that pot. So
seems to hit home.
But yeah, mate, appreciate your time, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this breakdown. As I said, there'll be more coming. Get in contact if you have something we've missed and you want to raise something. I appreciate you listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye for now.
See you guys.
If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.